And we're having this discussion, and I'm hoping at the end of this, we're going to take up some points of action to say, as the BMF, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're challenging the corporates. There are things that we're doing. And I will read that quote if those who have not read it, what you're requesting from the BMF actually in your book. But how do we then navigate this with our executives who are transformation fatigued?
It's always very interesting to me because so many of us share the same frustrations around engaging with Black executives. And for me, it always goes back to a decision that you take as a Black professional. Because the first step is always, what lens do you apply to everything that you do? I know for myself, the first lens that I apply to any situation is that I'm a Black woman. Then I'm a Black person. And then I'm a Black professional. And for me, what that means is that I can never be tired of dealing with issues that impact on Black women and Black people and Black professionals. And because those are my filters, they automatically speak to what my principles and values are, and ethically what guides me in everything that I do. I find it so disheartening that we are 25 years into democracy and people are already tired of fighting for Black people. After centuries of oppression that still exists. I don't believe that it is a case of Black executives having transformation fatigue. I believe that it is a case of Black executives protecting themselves. Because at the end of the day, it's stomach politics.
Yes.
I think the other issue is that we're still stuck in all of these catchphrases, and that's what stops us from dealing with the real issues. So right now, the buzzwords are diversity and inclusion. Everybody's hoo-haing about, our great diversity program and whatnot. But it's still a disservice to marginalized groups like Black professionals, because what happens is, you go and you apply for a job at a company that has been going on and on about how diverse they are. You go into this environment, the people that are in the environment are still not transformed. They're still racist, they're still sexist, they're still misogynistic. And so we walk into these environments and we have to deal with these people who are resentful of the fact that we're in these organizations. So I'm not interested in having conversations about transformation if transformation just means there's more Black people, or more Black women, or more people who are promoted that are of color. That's not transformation for me. When we're still dealing with people who are not paid what they should be paid, when their white counterparts still pay more than them, where junior people have to train white people to become their bosses. That is unacceptable to me. That's not transformation. And until we actually start dealing with that as an issue, when we start forcing organizations to actually transform themselves, transform their biases, because that comes through in recruitment processes, asking people for pay slips. You know, oh, we're big now. You know, even dealing with the fact that now we have this technology, right? That's fantastic that technology has been incorporated into business, but what is technology doing? Technology also has biases with which it's developed. And so all of us, whenever you apply for a job now, it's online. What does the technology pick up that determines whether or not we get invited for interviews or whether we make the shortlist? We don't even know what those things are. It's like, for instance, Snapchat and their filters. Those filters are developed for white people. Have you ever tried to use a Snapchat filter? The lips will always in here. It's not built for our full lips. And that's exactly how it is. And until we actually start questioning all of these things and really looking at these things and trying to understand where are the gaps and how do we start bridging them in a way that begins to truly benefit Black professionals. Because before we can even talk about having equality in the workplace, we have to talk about equity. We have to fix what has been wrong for so long first, then we can say, okay, now let's talk about how we can make things equal.
Thank you. So I've picked up on, I don't know whether it's a trend, and if it is a trend, it's a horrible trend. You're finding that a lot of black professionals are now meeting at psychiatric institutions. The ICASs are becoming the hub for people to meet because it is that bad in the workplace. People are on medication full time. People have heart attacks. You know, people die from stress. There are people who've gone through 189 processes. They know that they should have the job. They know that they're strong enough to have the job. But because of who they are and the color of their skin, they were told that for this particular process, you're not at the level that we require. The person walks out, crosses the street, and they're done. Okay. You spoke about an instance where you were home alone, and you literally felt like you're having a heart attack, and nobody was there. And when you got to the hospital, they said to you, "You've got too much stress." So in Tatefusi, how are we managing it in organizations? Because this has to go back to HR. You know, you go on sick leave, then you have to go on extended sick leave, and then ultimately at the end of the day, you come back. It's now not a conducive work environment, and what happens? Constructive dismissal. And that's another buzzword that's happening. You know, black people know it very well, constructive dismissal. White people get a golden handshake. We get constructive dismissal.
I just want to jump in on this one because the issue of mental health, specifically with black professionals within the workplace, is something that I'm particularly stressed by because we're dealing with a number of issues. Firstly, it's the stigmatization of mental health, what it is, what it looks like, and you know how black professionals have all of this pressure that they're dealing with, right? You are victimized at work, there's that stress. And it doesn't just stay at work, it follows you everywhere that you go. So it starts impacting your family life, it starts impacting the quality of your life as a whole. And you start to crack under the pressure because we're human. But you have to come to work every day and you have to put on a brave face and pretend everything's okay, which makes the load even heavier because you don't have that release. A lot of companies have wellness programs. There's a trust deficit that exists between employees and anything that the organization provides to assist them. So that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of people don't even use those services that are provided by organizations, because what if my boss finds out that I phoned ICAS and I complained about them? Right? And then there's the issue of if I do go and get assistance and my doctor wants to have me put into an institution for a few weeks, I'm going to come back to work and all of a sudden I'm incapacitated. I can no longer fulfill my function. And then I start being moved out of what I'm actually doing. Or my colleagues will find out because people gossip at the office. And then you start hearing things like, geez, did you forget to take your pill today? Wow. This stuff is happening. It's real. So we are not actually dealing with the issues. We're still talking around them. And yes, we can have HR practitioners who understand and have that black lens that they apply to stuff. But as long as they don't have organizational power transferred to them, there's not a damn thing they can do. If it is not driven from the top and is actually organizational culture to care about people and to prioritize fairness and equality and care, there's nothing an HR person can do. But that does not mean that HR people get to, you know, get out of jail free card, because they still have a job to do and fighting for what they know is right. Because HR is not just about the theoretic understanding of what it is. It's about so much more. It's about understanding people. It's about understanding cultures. And that's why representation is so important in the workplace. I'm sick and tired of walking into corporates and just seeing a sea of white people in a country that is majority black people. There is no reason why on the JSC, all the companies there, pretty much all of them, the CEOs are white and male. And white people are what percentage of South Africa? 8%. It's insane. Why are we comfortable with the way that things currently are? Why are we so okay with letting things continue? How much longer is it going to take before we reach our fed-up point?
Thank you. ask for I actually want to ask, so I mentioned constructive dismissal, but I don't think everybody here understands what that is, and how do we get to that point where we are now saying as an organization this is constructive dismissal?
Okay, almost no organization will ever admit to constructive dismissal. So organizations, they are the perpetrators of constructive dismissal. So constructive dismissal is when you have been pushed, in essence, to a point where your work environment becomes unbearable and you resign. But you obviously did not want to resign, you felt forced to resign, in essence. So what happens if you end up at the CCMA, for example, and you make a referral in relation to constructive dismissal? It differs significantly from ordinary dismissal because you've resigned, right? So let's imagine you were fired for stealing soap, okay? Let's just say. You were fired for stealing soap, it's an ordinary misconduct, right? And they fire you, you go to the CCMA and you say it's unfair. Now, at the CCMA, your employer has the duty to prove that your dismissal was fair, not you. You get there and you say, I think it was unfair. That's all you have to do, okay? You come with your dismissal letter to the CCMA and you say it was unfair because of X, Y, and Z. Your employer has the duty in law to prove that the dismissal was fair, okay? Now, constructive dismissal issue. You first have to prove that you were dismissed. Before you even get to fairness, you have to prove the existence of dismissal. Now, how do you prove the existence of dismissal when factually you resigned? Okay? So that becomes very, very problematic. And in when I have private clients, I often say, I don't know how long you can hold out, but let them fire you. Because proving constructive dismissal it's so hard. The way these systems are set up, especially, I mean, if you look at, you guys will even tell me more, but the way corporate South Africa, particularly white corporate South Africa, is set up and structured, the racism is so insidious, and it's part of, the network is so large, it's not about your company. So you become keenly aware that if I leave here with X, Y, and Z on my record, next company is going to hear, that client will hear, everybody will hear. The network is so, that sort of boys club, whether it's a black boys club or a white boys club, they work together. They understand each other. And then they see you as a pariah. You're just somebody who doesn't fit within the culture. And so you will never hear somebody. I mean, very rarely nowadays do we have cases where somebody says, "I was called the K word at work." That's not how racism works anymore. It's changed its face. It has transformed mutated into something much more insidious and dangerous because you can't place it. You can't say that happened, therefore it's racist. Commissioner will say, tell me how it was racist. And there's not a lot we can do from the legal end because we have to work with proof, evidence. That's the way the law works. So now with your constructive dismissal, you're going to get there and say, hey, I just had this feeling and I just knew. And chances are, the sad thing is, chances are the black commissioner is thinking, I know, fam, I know exactly what you're talking about. We know, other black people know. Once you know, you know. Once you've experienced that, you just know something is not right. But the question is whether or not you can prove it. So I think I actually asked specifically to talk about constructive dismissal because so many, the very few black professional cases that I have had before me are often constructive dismissal. And it's this word, everybody thinks they've been constructively dismissed because they were stressed and their boss, and it probably was true. It's probably true. Companies engage in constructive dismissal all the time, and even when they approach lawyers privately, we just want them out. What do we do? They don't even have hey, this person, we just have a problem with fit. There's no issue. This person has done nothing wrong. They come to the lawyer to say, finish them. That's what they come to the person, run a disciplinary hearing, please, and deal with them. That's what they want. They actually give you that brief. We want to fire them. Please do the necessary. So you have to understand in those situations, you're better off waiting until they dismiss you, go to the CCMA, conciliate, arbitrate, do all of those things, and let them prove that they've done something fairly, if that is the case.
I'm going to because I'm just watching time, the doctor said she's very strict about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start taking questions. I'll take them in batches of 3. But while we prepare to do that, I just wanted to ask Sihle, what are some of the soft skills you think that young professionals or graduates should be equipped with as they walk into the workplace? Because we know as they walk in there's no grad program that teaches you conflict management. But when you get in, you need to know how to manage conflict. And not just with your peers, but with your seniors or your seniors' seniors. What are some of those skills that you think we should, and when I say we, I'm talking about various organizations that we should put together that will educate our people around this is what you need to have. So that when you walk in there, it's a war room out there. It's a war zone. There's a lot happening out there. You need to have this so that you can navigate your way.
So, I mean, you mentioned one of the most important ones, conflict management. That's something that is very, very difficult to handle when you've never known what to expect. One of the things that I talk about in my book is how we go into the work environment and you're just thinking you're just going to do a job and get a salary. And somewhere in there you're going to be a manager, you're going to be a boss, you know? But you have no idea all the different challenges that you have to deal with. Dealing with bullies in the workplace. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What type of language is used in the workplace that is positive and negative, and how do you deal with that? How to deal with stress, where to go to get support when you're struggling with stress or anxiety, or you suspect that you might have depression. What are the signs of those things? How to form networks, how to identify people who would be beneficial to your network within the work environment. Because there are always going to be some people who are for you. There may not be a lot, but they will be there. But discernment is key, because you're also going to come across a lot of piranhas in the workplace. People who are going to pretend to be for you and then actually use whatever you say against you to get you out of the way, because after all, it's a competition, right? But also I think what's so important for people going into the workplace is, firstly, read and understand your contract of employment, what is expected of you, what your performance contract actually states and expects of you. Understand the basics, at least, of labor law. A lot of us are ignorant as hell about this stuff because we don't think about it until we're in trouble. So, I mean, to that end, what I've done now is launched a website called workingwhileblack.co.za. And the reason why I started it is because I understand that there are so many gaps that we have as black professionals. Because for a lot of people, it's first generation in a corporate environment. Or you may not be the first generation, but your parents may have been in the corporate environment, but they never fought anything. They just wanted to keep their jobs so that they provide for their families. So they never questioned, never shook any table, never did anything. And so still, it's as though you're the first generation. And so I use that platform as a way to try and bridge some of those gaps. So understanding constructive dismissal, understanding what different ways racism can manifest itself in the workplace, and how to identify it and how to deal with it. How to have difficult conversations with your boss, especially. One of the other things is learning the art of document keeping and recording everything. Critical, I cannot state this enough. Recording everything. If you have a conversation in the elevator with Susan, when you get to your desk, send an email. As per our conversation in the elevator, going from the 8th floor to the 11th floor today at 2:05 p.m., you said and I said. That is critical, because when you get to he said, she said, guess what? The system leans white ways. Always. A lot of, in theory, we talk about HR being for people, but the reality is that HR's first duty is to protect the organization. And we have to be realistic about that. And so we have to take the accountability for ourselves to protect ourselves as far as we can within the workplace.
Thank you. Yes, I think that does deliver on the story.